Treason is not the reason for the season. FAQ number 2. Didn't the founders intend for a little rebellion now and then? Didn't their tree of liberty drink the blood of tyrants and patriots? Wasn't that why they wrote the Constitution and Bill of Rights? To make sure citizens could overthrow the federal government? Thank you for your question. The short answer to your query is this. The Constitution defines taking up arms against the government as treason. So, no, the founders did not intend to encourage citizens to rebel against their government. When the founders spoke of the right to bear arms, they were speaking of militias, governed by Congress, subservient to the president, and the best protection against tyranny. And when they spoke of tyranny, they meant monarchy. The founders saw rebelling against a monarchy as just, but they saw rebelling against democracy as evil. In monarchies, the crime of treason and rebellion may admit of being pardoned or lightly punished, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of a republic ought to suffer death. Sam Adams. So, no, the founders never intended for the Constitution and Bill of Rights to overthrow the federal government. Slightly longer answer. In August of 1786, Shays and a group of farmers forced the debtors' courts to shut down. As the rebellion grew, it gained about 4,000 followers. In January of 1787, Shays marched 1,500 men on the Federal Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts in an attempt to seize its weapons and wage a full-fledged insurrection. Under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government had no money and no way to order state militias to fight Shays. Shays and his men ran amok for 10 months before the governor of Massachusetts put together a militia to stop Shays. Most of the founders saw Shays' rebellion as an existential threat to the nation. Ben Franklin referred to Shays' rebellion as a dangerous insurrection. George Washington referred to Shays' rebellion as a cloud of evils. John Adams would call Shays' rebellion an act of terrorism. Sam Adams advocated that the leaders of Shays' rebellion be quickly executed, saying, "In monarchies the crime of treason and rebellion may admit of being pardoned or lightly punished, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of a republic ought to suffer death." Just 4 months after Shays and his men stormed the Federal Armory, in May of 1787, the nation gathered for a Constitution Convention to throw out the weak Articles of Confederation and replace it with a much stronger federal government under the Constitution. The nation was nearly unanimous in its condemnation of Shays and his rebellion, and nearly unanimous in its support for a stronger constitution. Nearly unanimous, in that of the 7 main founding fathers, 6 of them roundly condemned Shays' rebellion and wanted a Constitution Convention. Jefferson was the lone founding father who defended and downplayed the danger of Shays' rebellion and opposed the Constitution. During Shays' rebellion and the Constitution Convention, Jefferson was in Paris as minister to France. Jefferson wrote private letters during this time that made clear he wanted to keep the weak federal government under the Articles of Confederation. Jefferson accused everyone of overblowing Shays' rebellion, the reason the Constitutional Convention happened in the first place, in order to seize power for themselves. Wonderful is the effect of impudent and persevering lying, about the colonies being in anarchy. Yet where does this anarchy exist? Where did it ever exist, except in the single instance of Massachusetts, Shays' rebellion? And can history produce an instance of a rebellion so honorably conducted? Jefferson argued that Shays and his men storming the Federal Armory in Springfield to seize federal weapons was honorable instead of traitorous. Jefferson was entirely alone in this opinion. Jefferson downplayed the dangers of Shays' rebellion, saying a little rebellion now and then is a good thing and saying the tree of liberty must be watered from time to time with the blood of tyrants and patriots. Jefferson showed callous indifference toward any innocent people killed by Shays' rebellion. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? When the Constitution Convention was finished with its final version, but before it was ratified by the nation, Jefferson received a copy of it. And Jefferson hated the Constitution. There are very good articles in it, and very bad. For one, Jefferson said he did not like the idea of the office of president as spelled out in the Constitution. History, Jefferson said, had set me against a chief magistrate. Jefferson concluded, "I hope in God this article will be rectified before the new Constitution is accepted." 8 months later, in June of 1788, the U.S. Constitution was ratified by the nation. So, while it is true that Jefferson wrote "A little rebellion is a good thing," he wrote it in opposition to the Constitution, not as a reflection of the Constitution's design or intent. And while it is also true that Jefferson wrote "The tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of tyrants and patriots," Jefferson's own actions didn't match his words. As governor of Virginia during the American Revolution, when British forces had landed, most expected Jefferson, as governor and commander-in-chief of the state militia, to lead the militia to attack the British. Instead, Jefferson packed his bags and ran away, leaving Virginia to fend for itself. He was called the coward of Carter's Mountain for running away from the defense of his own nation. So, yes, Jefferson wrote "A little rebellion is a good thing," and the rest of the nation said "A little rebellion shall be defined as treason," and ratified it into the Constitution. And yes, Jefferson said his tree of liberty needed to be watered with the blood of patriots other than himself. But both of these quotes came from Jefferson lobbying against the Constitution. Neither of these quotes reflect the founders' intentions for the Constitution and Bill of Rights.